Welcome to a night of queer and trans joy. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It really is special to me. Basically, I was already writing about my experience coming out later in life. I used it as a bit of a way to process, but I was also really obsessed with being understood. Truthfully, it's fairly easy for me to be seen within the confines of this documentary. For better or for worse, I've got pretty comfortable in front of the camera, and I've dragged people in my life in front of it as well. Again, for better or worse. The hardest thing is I had to manage in this process of just how authenticity creeped into all aspects of my life and sort of rebuilt it from the inside out. And I really mean it, rebuilt it from the inside out. I was regularly wrestling with old memories and processing new things and new passions and everything like that. It was just a lot every day. And so I was trying to kind of make sense of it to put together this movie and tell that story. But at the same time, I was just trying to hold on to my life and our life, our family life. And frankly, that was the hardest part, is the space between the takes. It wasn't any of the logistics. It was just hanging on to my life. I try and write every day, even if it never goes anywhere, and it often never does. It really helps me process my feelings and makes me feel like the messiness of life is kind of momentarily organized. Like if I put a thought into a notepad beside my bed, that specific anxiety is at least taken care of. It never stays taken care of, but for that night it's kind of gone. But one of the things that you recognize is that there are certain topics in your life, particularly around change and transition, that carry more tension in them than others. That when you start writing about them, they just feel hard to talk about. They feel difficult in a way that is getting from your thought process down into a piece of paper. You can feel this conflict, this grief, this whatever that thing is kind of that's dragging it out. Simply writing about the euphoria I was feeling at one point, about a dress I was wearing, or anything kind of in that space of expression. I felt such shame, like I was going to be found out all over again, and I was out. But just the idea of writing, I enjoyed wearing a dress today, or that feeling of being at home in my body and something like that, it was like, someone's going to read this and know that I'm trans, and it's like, you've been trans for a year now. Like, think the spoiler's out. Like, people know about this about you. You've told your dad. But usually the closer the topic is to the core of my life, the more tension there is in writing or talking about it. And actually yesterday, I sat down and I talked to my parents. And I sat down and I talked to them for 2 hours. And we talked about my childhood. We talked about how they didn't know or what being in the closet felt like in Macklin. We talked about how they felt in that moment of like when I first told them that I was trans around these. And it was hard. It was really hard, and I was so drained afterwards. I was just dripping with anxiety beforehand and just wrung out like a sponge afterwards. And then later last night, after I'd got my kids to bed, and my mom and I are in the kitchen, and I look over at her and we just kind of meet eyes and we stare at each other for about 30 seconds. And we walk over to each other and we hug each other for a really long time. And I can feel in that moment, that processing that happened of just letting go. So you can exercise that tension out of you, but it takes it out of you. And that's been this project of just it taking it out of you. Yeah. Gets worse. But that worry with my parents of being found out, and that is the word, it's being found out, it was just gone. And I woke up today and I was having coffee with my mom, and I thought there was such freedom with the way we were talking to each other, asking about things related to trans, not related to trans, but we were back. And it had taken years to get there, but it meant the world to me. I don't talk much about Ashley as part of this. I don't write much about Ashley, and part of it is that that is her story to tell. That is her story to tell. But the other part of it is there is that same tension that I'm describing of grief and guilt associated with those things. And it took me a long time to be able to even say those words and admit grief and guilt related to it. But the reality is that I didn't just implode my life, I imploded our life and our family's life as a part of this. This was a major change to both of our lives. Watching a wave from a distance is this beautiful and elegant thing. When you see it kind of creeping on the beach and it's this massive kind of thing that comes through, it's this beautiful thing. And a lot of people can look at that and say, oh my God, how gorgeous is that transformation that is happening. But when you're up close to the wave, it is violent and it is destructive and it is hard to watch. And Ashley was right next to the water on a day-to-day basis on this. And that makes it hard to talk about because I know I put us in this place at various points because of decisions that I was making, that I feel good about. But that feeling is still there. Still, I will be forever proud of where we are at and how we have navigated this. Truly. And she has been there the whole time. She's been delivering dresses at my doorway and saying, I think this would look nice on you. I was going to wear one of the first dresses that she got me tonight. And then actually I was wearing it and she turned into the doorway and she goes, are you wearing that? Because it didn't really look good anymore. And again, hormone changes, they're real. And so it's a gift that keeps on giving you. She taught me how to do makeup. She encouraged me to go to therapy. She did this despite the fears, and it made so much difference in my life. Thank you. And thank you for reminding me to take my estrogen shot today. Bit of a disaster now, but we live with our choices. I often repeat the line, and I've said it so many times, I've kind of lost the feeling on it, but if being trans was a choice, is a choice that I would make every day. I love being trans. But the reality is that I spent years of my life praying and wishing and hoping it would just go away, that I just had some interesting curiosities around gender, and it never did. It is hard to let go of shame. It is really hard to let go of shame. It sits in the cracks of your life, every detail. Shame lies to you. It keeps you from being honest with yourself and others. It is selfish. It keeps you small and makes you act out of a place of embarrassment rather than joy and purpose. And that is its job. It does that regularly, and if you let it, it will ruin your life. Learning to let go of shame has required me to embrace vulnerability, the sharing of an honest, true thing deep inside. And over the last few years, I've had to embrace a practice of vulnerability. And I like that word, practice of vulnerability, because it's not showing up once. It's trying when you can, when the conditions are right, to meet at the moment. It's a practice of vulnerability. It's building a muscle of it. And this year was just like a triathlon of building vulnerability practice. Like that was what this is. It's hard, and despite my rave reviews of living with more emotional honesty and openness, it often just hurts a lot. It feels terrifying to tell someone how you really feel, or have to share a boundary or request an emotional need. I spent huge chunks of the year just in what I would call a vulnerability hangover. Just wondering why I said something the way I said it, or how I could have phrased something differently, or just maybe I should be mute for a month and see how that goes. And sometimes you go, I'm now telling the whole internet this, and that feels weird. because this vulnerability hangovers don't really scale the same way. It's almost worse when it's one-on-one. The internet's fine. I mean, what are you going to do about it? Anyway, I was in the middle of a vulnerability hangover. I was about a month ago after sharing something very true and very honest and something I feel good about now, but I was in the middle of this. Why have I done this? What is wrong with me? And so I decided to take this pity party on the road and distract myself at this architectural salvage store. I'm sure we know kind of the one I'm referring to, but they sell old fixtures and cabinetry and renovation materials. It's less organized and more kind of loosely structured chaos, right? And there's doors and there's knobs and then dishwashers and like just stuff smattering everywhere on the first floor. And on the second floor, there's a bunch of cabinets, and I'm walking through and I'm going, why was I doing this? Just learn to be quiet, please. Beating myself up over this. When all of a sudden, I'm standing in front of this 1970s kind of wicker, orange wood bathroom vanity, right? And the only reason this thing is special, it's not worth selling. I'm standing in front of this. The only reason it's special, it is the exact same vanity that my parents had in their house in Macklin, Saskatchewan, a town of about 1,200 people that I shared. And I shared this house with my parents and my siblings, Michael and Kathy. My brother, who is 5 years older than me, lived in the basement until he moved out to go to university in Saskatoon. At which point, I took over the basement bedroom, which had its own bathroom. And this bathroom was that orange teak wood kind of thing, and it's that same thing. And now I was standing right in front of it. It felt like I'd kind of time traveled back to being this 13-year-old kid, right? And I'm 38. I'm very much not 13. But in that moment, I'd taken kind of this big step backwards into being 13 in Macklin in that basement bathroom. Now, around 13 years old, I had started to go through puberty, and as someone that is currently going through this process for the second time, it's quite the trip. As with an adult kind of perspective on it, it is a strange time. There's hard days in it. You kind of feel discombobulated all the time in your body. And I was very much there. But in addition to the usual puberty stuff, I was also experiencing a lot of first feelings around gender. And it's vague, right? It's not like I knew I was trans at 13 kind of thing. I just had a sense of difference. I had a vague sense of difference kind of around it. The basement bathroom, with its distance from the rest of the family and the house and a proper lock on the door, kind of allowed me space to explore. So once in a while, I took makeup or old clothes from a donation box and I would dress up in this bathroom. And I still remember seeing myself in that mirror. It's such a strong memory. And I remember feeling right in some way. I remember feeling really at home in myself in some way. And then all of that collapsing really quickly, hearing the door to my parents' house kind of come in and feeling really scared and again of being found out. Became very clear around that. And again, I came from a loving home. I came from a place that had a lot of care, but I knew instinctively that wasn't something that I could do. I couldn't manage kind of that type of exposure. And that continued for a long time, on and off, for more than 2 decades. Cross-dressing came and went, but the feelings were always there. They were always there. The fears of if people only knew, but no one did. Not my parents or siblings when I lived with them, not my friends throughout my teenage years or my 20s, and not my partner before or after we got married. It was just me. The thing is, when you hold on to a secret like that for such a long time, the story you tell yourself is, this is too much, I am too much. That feeling gets carved into the bedrock of who you are. You add in media representation of trans people, either murder victims or serial killers or jokes, and you end up with a pretty good story to tell yourself that the person you feel inside is not going to be accepted by the world. And despite dysphoria and bouts of depression and anxiety, my life was pretty good in a sense that I had opportunities through school, then work. I had friends, and my family, both the one I grew up with and the one Ashley and I are lucky to be sharing now, is kind and loving. But the thing is, the entire time, I was still that kid in the basement playing with makeup and clothes. Even when I had long breaks from cross-dressing, I wanted these feelings to go away so badly, but they just never did. They simmered and they bubbled up in other ways. Reddit forums sometimes, which was funny, but... But what did go away slowly over time is my ability to hear my own voice. It got so quiet that I eventually couldn't hear it, and my life felt less mine and more of a projection of who I was supposed to be in the world. I didn't have language for who I was, so I listened to other people's stories, followed compasses that weren't mine in hopes that it would eventually feel right, and that was damaging not just to myself, but to those around me. There was collateral damage to living a life that wasn't mine. Not wanting to be trans for 20 years didn't make me any less trans. And in taking those first steps toward a more authentic life, I could start to hear that voice again. It was quiet at first. It was really whisper quiet, but it started getting louder and louder all the time. And I'm finding safety in this community and within myself, really learning to trust my heart again and learning to trust that voice again. Lately, I've been thinking about who I'm doing this for, why I'm telling these stories, trying to come up with some magnanimous reason, particularly given the political climate that we find ourselves in. And I hope it's useful. I hope my story resonates and that some kid in a small town can connect into it and find the courage to listen to their own heart earlier. But if I'm being honest, when I think about who this is for, I'm thinking of a particular kid from Macklin, Saskatchewan, scrubbing makeup off her face in fear of the world knowing who she actually is. I spend a lot of time talking about queer and trans joy and focused on the life I'm building now because it's easier than looking backwards, but focusing only on joy is a lie because grief is real too. Despite my attempts to put as much distance between me and the kid in the basement bathroom mirror, she's still in here. She makes her presence known in my creative project, regularly shows up in my relationships, and is felt deeply in looking in my kid's eyes. If I got anything out of this project, it's that part of coming home means embracing that kid with arms wide open. David is a part of my story. I can't abandon this person, so I carry her. She deserves to see just how far we've come. What I'm learning through storytelling is that this kind of healing is a group project, that our fates are tied together. And that's what tonight is about, a brief moment for us to see each other as we are. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It means the world to me that you're here. Thank you. Thank you. Now that the cameras are off, I can be more sincere about this. But that's okay. They can cut the audio. Thank you very much. That was really special, and I went off book a little bit, but thank you very much. We can continue to party. you.